Graybridge woke before the sun and tried not to make eye contact with the mist. Iris Calder liked it that way. In the half-light, houses lost their faces and became simple silhouettes. She could walk past them and imagine the people inside as outlines too, routine-shaped, predictable, faint. She moved like breath over glass, present, then gone. Before you proceed any further, please like and subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Now let's proceed with the story. Close behind her, the river ticked against the stones, clock slow. She knew the sound by heart. It had kept her company for years. There was a bench at the bend, old and slanted, where the older branches bowed low enough to brush your hair. Iris paused there, fingertips grazing the damp wood, and counted to 7. Not for luck, for order. 7 breaths until the hum inside her chest quieted. 7 until her face remembered how to look like anyone else's. Someone had been here last night. She could tell from the scuffing in the soil by the roots, the way a careless heel had chewed a crescent into the mud. People left signatures everywhere. They never noticed. She stood very still and tilted her head, listening to the town wake up behind her. Garage doors yawning, a dog protesting, a kettle lifting from a boil. That dog would be Mr. Gilroy's, 2 streets over. Old, stubborn, hard of hearing. Iris pictured its gray muzzle and felt a tiny, glassy click of memory, then closed the door on it. On Main Street, the bakery lights came on like a polite confession. In the far window of the apothecary, more gift shop than medicine these days, a figure hovered, straight-backed and careful. Gideon Pike. Iris watched him for a moment, unreadable as always in his pressed shirts and slate sweater vests, then turned toward the narrow lane that led home. Gideon had eyes like winter sky, pale, patient, unforgiving. People said he knew every family in Graybridge the way an archivist knows shelves, what belonged where, what had been misplaced. He'd been on every committee, sat every vigil, organized every casserole when a tragedy thudded into town like a dropped anvil. He had a habit of smoothing tablecloths and stories alike, straightening, setting things to rights. He watched Iris the way he watched the weather, not constantly, not obsessively, just with respect for what could go wrong. By 9, the mist had torn into ribbons. Iris was at the library where she volunteered 2 mornings a week. She liked the hush here, too, but of a different species, deliberate, curated, the kind that made you aware of your own breathing. She shelved returned books and tracked spines with her fingertips, reading fragments of titles like overheard secrets. The librarian, Mrs. Blodgett, kept up a pleasant murmur about an upcoming author talk and the youth chess club needing new boards. "You're a godsend," she said, as she often did. "Honestly, Iris, I don't know how we managed before you." Iris smiled the small, obedient smile she kept in her pocket for times like this, and set another book precisely flush with its neighbors. She liked the weight of gratitude. It was soft and warm, like a folded sweater. You could tuck into it. You could look very good wearing it. Near 11, the door chime jingled and Gideon Pike stepped inside, shaking off the last drops of morning. He had a canvas folder with him and a guiltless way of taking space. They exchanged greetings, hers cool, his cordial, before he moved to the community board and considered the flyers. Lost cat, calico, 1 torn ear. Babysitter available. Meditation circle, a church supper. Another lost pet, a tabby this time, another. Gideon removed his glasses, breathed on them, and wiped them with the precision of a ritual. Mrs. Blodgett drifted over. "Mr. Pike," she said brightly, "have you met our Iris?" "Oh, yes, I know the Calders." He offered Iris that winter sky look. "It's good to see young people giving their time. A town breathes easier when its youth are in the habit of kindness." "I like the quiet," Iris said. It was close enough to true to pass. He smiled. "Not warm, not cold, archival. Quiet is a kind of kindness, too." After he left, Iris's hands resumed their rhythm on the shelves, but the hum inside her chest changed pitch. She was aware of it the way you're aware of a fly circling a room. Little loops, persistent, easily crushed if it landed. At noon, on her way out, she matched pace with Gideon at the crosswalk. "Mr. Pike," she said, as if the thought had just occurred, "people lose a lot of cats here." "Do they?" He tilted his head, polite befuddlement arranged like a napkin. "The bulletin board," she said. "It's always full. Graybridge is a place that loves its pets. Loving means losing, and worrying when you're waiting to lose."
"I suppose," she watched his jaw. It was not a jaw that trembled easily. "Are you fond of animals, Iris?" he asked. "I'm fond of order," she said, and shrugged, the way someone shrugs when they're admitting to a harmless quirk about color-coding their pantry. He nodded, turned that over like a coin, and put it away. That afternoon, the wind came up and teased the elm outside Iris's window into scratching the house like a pleading hand. She sat at her desk and opened a notebook with a blue grid cover. Inside, her handwriting was neat, narrow, without ornament. If someone had opened it, they would have seen nothing alarming. Lists of library tasks, grocery items, quotes copied from books. Between those lists, in the breathing space where the ink thinned, there were numbers, distances, times of day, cross streets. She could recite them by heart. At 3, her phone hummed, a number not in her contacts. She watched the screen until it went still, then listened to the voicemail. "Miss Calder?" a woman's voice said, calm as a pane of glass. "My name is Dr. Saira Halim. I volunteer with the Community Wellness Council. Gideon Pike suggested I reach out. We're organizing a talk next week. Nothing heavy, just strategies for keeping steady in anxious times. He mentioned you might be interested in helping us with the logistics. If you have a moment, I'd love to chat. We can always use precise minds." Precise. The word sat well. Iris replayed it twice, the way you might roll a hard candy against your teeth. She called back. Dr. Halim answered on the first ring. Her voice was pleasant in a practiced way, like a hallway painted a safe color. "Iris," she said, "thank you. I'm hoping to put together a space that feels predictable. Predictable can be a balm. And frankly, Gideon tells me you're good at making things run on time." "I am," Iris said. "What do you need?" "A checklist for the venue. Seating, sign-in, flow. You'd attend with me on a walkthrough tomorrow? 4 o'clock? The old Grange Hall." Iris's pen made a small, satisfied circle. "I'll be there." When they hung up, she stared out at the elm's restless silhouette until the light turned that grainy color that makes a room feel like an old photograph. A community wellness talk. Predictable flow. Sign-in sheets, everyone filing their names into columns like well-behaved children. It was tidy, contained. She closed the notebook and stood. In the hall mirror, her face looked tasteful and harmless, and exactly as planned. If she tilted her head just so, she could almost see what Gideon thought he saw, a young woman with a knack for order, helping the town breathe easier. She went for a walk to bleed off the surplus electricity. At the river bend, the bench crouched under its fringe of leaves, the crescent of last night's scuff already softening. A crow rattled in the branches and laughed to itself. On the opposite bank, a boy in a red hoodie was throwing sticks, trying to make them land like arrows. He glanced up and caught her looking. Iris lifted a hand in a neutral wave. He waved back, reassured by the choreography adults crave from one another. See, I'm safe, you're safe, we know the steps. He went back to his sticks. She watched 3 more throws, then turned toward home. That night, Graybridge settled into its familiar grammar of lamps behind curtains and the soft punctuation of car doors shutting. Iris made tea. She folded laundry. She checked the locks, front, back, window latches, once, twice, 7 times. She lay in bed with the window cracked open just enough for the elm to whisper a little nonsense. Sleep came in slices. Across town, Gideon Pike sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. He wrote a list, dates, names, the radius of each disappearance, the ways anxiety had threaded the town like fishing line. He underlined 3 items and drew a box around them. Then he picked up his phone and typed, "Saira, she agreed, tomorrow, 4 p.m., Grange." He set the phone down and listened to the house. In the quiet, he could hear it, the faint, steady tick that meant something unseen had been wound too tight. In the morning, they would begin, and the river, patient as ever, would keep the time. At 4 o'clock, the Grange hall smelled like dust that had learned manners. Old wood, lemon oil, a faint iron note from the radiator pipes. Iris arrived 3 minutes early and stood in the entry, letting her eyes measure the room in clean lines. Door to sign-in table, 8 paces. Table to chairs, 12. Chairs to stage, 15. Stage to exit, 2 steps up, 14 across, 2 down. She tucked the numbers into their labeled drawers. Breathing smoothed. Dr. Saira Halim came in with a conference tote and a smile that didn't insist on anything. "You're a marvel," she said lightly. "Early is the best kind of kindness." Iris nodded. "Do you want rows or a circle?"
"Rows," Saira said, then tipped her head as if consulting the ceiling. "But spaced, breathing room between them. Predictability doesn't have to feel tight." They worked without chatter. Iris tested the floor's soft spots with the heel of her palm, marked them with tape so no chair legs would wobble. She aligned the sign-in pens parallel to the form margins, rotated the clipboards so the spring clasps wouldn't jut like teeth. Saira unrolled a banner that read, "Community Steady," in clean sans serif, a color somewhere between rain and comfort. Gideon arrived last, his canvas folder tucked under one arm, 2 paper cups of tea in a cardboard caddy. He set them down as if he were setting down a verdict. "Chamomile," he said. "No one ever argues with chamomile." "Thank you," Saira said. "We were just deciding where to put the table for the map." "The map?" Iris asked. "A little exercise," Saira said, rummaging in the tote and producing a roll of butcher paper like a magician's tame trick. "We draw Graybridge, loose but recognizable. We invite people to place small pins where they feel most at ease, parks, porches, bakeries, and where they feel uneasy. The body knows maps before the mind does. It helps people name what their skin already knows. Crowds like activities. Idle hands fidget. We can give the fidget a job." Iris lifted the butcher paper's edge, gauging its weight. "We'll need 2 maps, one for ease, one for unease. Otherwise we'll get mixed signals. People hate to choose between 2 states and end up telling you neither." Saira's smile sharpened in approval. "Exactly the kind of mind I was hoping for." They walked the perimeter, discussing signage. Iris traced the wall with her fingertips, counting nail holes hidden under layers of paint. When she pushed on a panel near the stage, a narrow door breathed open on its hinge.
The utility closet was dark and sour, a slumped mop, a yellow bucket that remembered an old spill, coils of cord like asleep snakes. On the inside wall, a pegboard with hooks in tidy columns, most empty. One hook held a loop of thin red twine. It was nothing. It was everything. The hum rose in Iris's chest, bees in a jar. She kept her face calm and her hand on the door and her voice exactly right. "We should tape this. People will wonder." Gideon stepped forward and peered in. "Yes, tape it, and add 'staff only' in bold. People obey bold." Saira watched Iris, not the closet. "Do you prefer handling the welcome table or the map station?" Iris said "welcome" before the word could choose her. Then, as if to turn the choice into a gift, "I'm precise with names." "Perfect," Saira said. "We'll add a column on the sign-in for emergency contact. People like thinking someone will be called if they faint. Add phone numbers after the names, left to right. It reads like a sentence." "Done," Saira said, and wrote herself a note, though she didn't need it. Gideon opened his folder and drew out a small plastic bin with "Lost and Found" written in faded marker. Inside, a handful of objects mutely asked for owners: a knit glove, 2 church keys on a heart-shaped ring, a baby sock with a duck stitched on the cuff, a metal tag the size of a coin, stamped "Clover." The hum altered. Iris's vision narrowed into a tunnel with the tag in the center. Her fingers, obedient, social, picked up the heart-shaped ring and set it closer to the edge. "We can put this by the door," she said. "People see themselves best on their way out." "Agreed," Gideon said. He didn't look at her looking, but he didn't not look either. Saira knocked on the stage twice, a tock-tock. "Iris, would you walk up there and tell me what you see?" she asked, tone slipping into consultant without putting on a lab coat. "Pretend you're giving the welcome. Where do your eyes land? Where do your feet go? What feels unkind in the room?" Iris mounted the 2 steps and stood at the lip. The hall spread below like a diagram. She traced sight lines the way a hand traces a scar. "That exit sign is too bright. It will pull eyes when you need them on you. The clock ticks too loud. People will think about time instead of words. The fan cage rattles, back left corner. It will sound like whispering." Saira's chin dipped, listening not just to Iris's inventory, but to the fact of it. "And you, where would you want to stand?" Iris said, "Here," and placed her feet exactly on the plank seam. A seam helps. It's a line that admits a line exists. Saira smiled, small. "You like seams." "I like things that admit what they are." They ran the checklist. Chairs in staggered rows, tape over the closet latch, program leaflets stacked so the edges made a single clean spine. At the welcome table, Saira wrote columns: name, contact, emergency contact, and, innocently, almost as an afterthought, pets at home. Yes, no.
"For therapy animal arrangements," she said aloud, to nobody in particular. "Allergies, planning." Iris's pen paused 1/10 of a second too long. Then it moved again, paving stones laid at an even pace. "We'll need a prefer not to say option," she said. "People resent being cornered." "Of course," Saira said, and added a 3rd box, an easy box, a door that was there if you needed it. Gideon adjusted the map table so it flanked the sign-in, not opposite it. A funnel, not a collision. "Light," he murmured, half to himself. "People are kinder to their secrets in light they can name." "Will the church group lend us extra pins?" Saira asked. "They had that quilting bee last month. Remember the jar of colored ones?" "I'll ask." Gideon looked at Iris again, openly now. "You've been generous with your time. If it isn't too much, would you copy the lost pet notices from the library board? We'll make a small corner for unresolved goodbyes. Ritual helps grief remember it's not alone. The word landed like a hand on the back of Iris's neck. Unresolved. She kept her face bland as flour. "I can do that," she said. "I'm good at categories." "I know," he said, and there was no accusation in it. There was only winter, pale, patient, unforgiving. They broke at dusk. The hall exhaled behind them, released from inspection. Outside, the sky had bruised a little around the edges. The elm by the steps stroked the air as if it were smoothing its own worry flat. "Walk with me?" Saira asked, easy as an umbrella, offered against a half-committed rain. "I park on Maple." "Sure," Iris said, and adjusted to Saira's pace without thinking. They moved past the pharmacy window where Gideon's reflection lagged a beat behind theirs, too slow to be accidental, too fast for a coincidence, then vanished. "I like the way you catalog. It's a gift," Saira said. "It's just comfortable," Iris said. "When does it stop being comfortable? For you?" Saira asked gently. "Not in general." They reached the corner. A car hissed by. Somewhere a crow worked at a syllable like a puzzle it could almost solve. "If something I've arranged gets moved," Iris said. "If a seam tears. If someone ignores the tape on a door I've taped." Saira nodded, as if Iris had said nothing more dangerous than salt goes better last than first. "Then we'll be careful with doors." "Good," Iris said, and let herself smile an acceptable smile. They parted at Maple. Iris took the long way home without deciding to. The river had switched to its evening register, deep as a promise made in bad light. I counted 7 lampposts between the Grange and the Bend. I said each number in my head and matched the rhythm to my steps until the humming surrendered. Across town, in his kitchen, Gideon set the Clover tag on his legal pad and drew a circle around the word pets on a photocopy of Saira's sign-in sheet. He wrote, "Place lost and found by exit. Watch for eye flick." Then lower, smaller, red twine, seam. He drank the last of the chamomile, even though it had gone lukewarm. He stared at the tag until its letters rearranged into shapes that meant nothing. Then he turned off the light and stood in the dark a moment longer than was strictly necessary, listening for a tick only he seemed to hear. By morning, the town had its polite mask back on. Iris walked through it and mirrored the expression perfectly. At the library, she copied the lost pet notices, one by one, as if transcribing a hymn. She ironed the creases with the side of her hand, set each sheet square on the glass, closed the lid without a clack. Calico, one torn ear. Tabby, answers to button. A rabbit with one black paw. The word missing repeated until it felt like a polite way of saying vanished. "Bless you," Mrs. Blodgett said, passing with a cart. "You're saving me hours." "It's nothing," Iris said, and trimmed a ragged edge so precisely that the air seemed to notice. A woman came in with a flyer still warm from her home printer. A little girl clung to her arm, serious-eyed, clutching a leash without a dog. The mother's voice tried for upbeat and bumped against a worry that had slept in her ribs for days. "Our Clover," she said to Mrs. Blodgett. "We've put up signs, but just in case." Clover. The name moved through Iris's chest like a cold draft beneath a door. She kept her eyes on the paper cutter and waited for the hum to settle.
"We'll add it to the board," Mrs. Blodgett said. "Kindness arranged in neat stacks. People do look." Iris took the flyer and made 3 copies without being asked. She aligned the corners. She smoothed the staples. She did not look at the girl's hand on the unused leash. After lunch, Iris walked to the Grange Hall to drop off the notices. Clouds had gathered like a committee preparing to vote. The hall's lock gave under the key Saira had sent, its turn soft as a secret. Inside, the room held yesterday's order like a breath held too long. She set the copies at the welcome table. Then she checked the tape on the utility closet. The strip she'd laid was there, clean and firm. But the latch had a new polish on it, a faint rubbed shine around the curve, as if a thumb had tested it. She pressed her own thumb to the mark and felt a small bright click in her bones. "That wasn't me," she said aloud. The sound of her voice in the empty room felt like a pebble tossed into a deep well. She retaped the door, a second layer, careful, aligned. She wrote "staff only" in block letters and underlined it once. Then, because the hum in her chest had begun to rise, she opened the closet she was telling others not to open. She flicked on her phone's light. Mop, bucket, coils, pegboard, hooks in tidy columns, one holding a loop of thin red twine. She reached up and touched the twine. It was ordinary, hardware store, unremarkable. She took it down anyway and coiled it around her fingers, counting to 7. She slid the coil into her pocket, shut off the light, and closed the door. She smoothed the tape a third time. Back at the welcome table, she rehearsed. Pen at the ready, clipboard turned so the spring clasp didn't glare. "Welcome," she said under her breath. "Sign here. Name, contact, emergency contact, and whether you have pets at home. Yes, no, or prefer not to say." The words came out soft and neutral, every syllable laid in a row. She watched her own mouth shape them, as if her lips were practicing a stranger's smile. When she left, the sky had gone from gray to the color of an eraser after long use. On the steps, she paused. Across the street, Gideon Pike stood in the apothecary doorway, speaking with Mr. Gilroy, the old man from 2 streets over with the hard-of-hearing dog. Mr. Gilroy's hands drew small maps in the air. Gideon's winter eyes listened without blinking. Iris kept walking. People's conversations were their own. She preferred rooms where the furniture said exactly what it was. At home, she made dinner with the sound off. Knife, cutting board, the small diplomacy of assembling simple things. She ate standing up, counting bites. She washed the dish and let it dry without a towel, because air is orderly if you give it a job. Her phone chimed at 8. A text from Saira. "Tomorrow still good? 6 p.m. doors, 7 p.m. start. I'll bring pins. Thank you again for the map idea, for the welcome, for the way you straighten the edges." Iris typed, "Yes, I'll be early." A second message came through before she put the phone down, from an unknown number, unsaved, the kind people use when they mean to be quick. "You're good at names." She stared at it. The screen showed no bubbles, no ellipses, no second thought approaching. She typed, "Who is this?" and the phone remained a square of light that made the rest of the room look like something the light had rejected. She deleted the exchange. She wasn't sentimental about letters that didn't sign themselves. Sleep was a careful performance that night. She lay still, counted seams in the ceiling plaster, let the elm whisper old nonsense. 3 times she got up to check the lock. On the 4th, she didn't. Control meant knowing when to stop. Across town, Gideon wrote notes by the yellow kitchen light. He circled Clover, drew a line to pets at home. He made a small list of people whose eyes tended to flick when a question passed close to a bruise. He texted Saira, "Line of sight from welcome table to maps is clean. Watch latch on utility door." Saira replied, "Noted," and "Let's keep the questions soft enough to walk on." Morning arrived more certain than the weather had promised. The Grange Hall smelled faintly of lemon oil and respectful dust. Iris arrived at 5:30, as promised only to herself. Chairs, straight,
Clock removed and replaced with a silent one from Saira's tote. Exit sign, still too bright, but she'd learned which battles were worth winning. The closet tape, intact, unbroken. She put her hand on it anyway, feeling for a story beneath the glue. It held. At 6, Saira breezed in with a jar of colored pins and a box of tissues, softness staged, comfort rehearsed. She said, "You're an angel, the kind that likes clipboards." "I like flow," Iris said. "We can call it that," Saira said, and set out the pins as if they were candy no one would eat.
By 1:15, people had begun to gather at the door with that polite stiffness crowds wear to civic events. Gideon stood near the maps, chatting about nothing, in a way that made people feel better about that nothing. The lost and found bin sat by the exit, newly labeled, "Do any of these belong to you?" The metal tag stamped Clover rested on top like a coin waiting to choose a side. The first person at Iris's cable was a man in a suit that had been careful 10 years ago. He wrote his name with too much pressure and dented the page. "Pets?" Iris asked, light as practice. "Yes, no, or prefer not to say?" "Yes," he said, "2 parakeets." He sounded faintly embarrassed by the smallness of his living things. "Thank you," Iris said, and let a smile warm exactly the right degree. A woman with a newborn followed, moving with that protective geometry new mothers invent. "Prefer not to say," she murmured, and Iris ticked the box. A teenager in a red hoodie, perhaps the boy from the river, perhaps not, the town made many near duplicates, hesitated over the emergency contact column and wrote his own name there too. "Sometimes that's how it is," Iris said, and meant nothing and everything. The line flowed, names, numbers, boxes checked, a small choreography of disclosure. Iris watched hands. Some shook, some didn't. She watched the tiny flicker people couldn't help when the pets line arrived, as if a small lamp had been turned on in a room where you weren't sure you wanted light. She kept her face calm, her voice level. She was a seam, and you could trust a seam. Saira circulated, smoothing nerves. "Pins on the left map for ease," she'd say, pointing to the butcher paper sketched with Graybridge's loose bones. "Pins on the right map for unease, anywhere your body gets louder than the room." People pinned bakeries, porches, church pews for ease. They pinned the underpass, the edge of the river near the bend, a patch of woods beyond the school, for unease. The right map glittered a little more as the jar of red pins went down. Gideon drifted between the maps and the exit, his attention quiet but exact. He spoke to the mother with the girl and the unused leash. He showed her the lost and found bin with the gentle gravity people use around grief, even small grief. "Oh," the woman said softly. She picked up the Clover tag, thumb finding the worn place where a collar ring once worried the edge. This is ours." The room changed by a fraction, not louder, not quieter, just tuned. A note the ear didn't hear so much as agree with. "It was turned in last week," Gideon said. "I was hoping to find the owner." The little girl took the tag carefully, like a coin from a fountain you weren't sure you were allowed to touch. She looked at Iris, then at the door, then back at the tag, as if she was learning that objects could keep secrets too. "Thank you," the mother said. We'll keep looking. We'll put your flyer where people will see it," Iris said, and did not let her eyes fall to the jar of unease pins clustered thick along the river's bend. When the chairs filled and the low human rustle settled, Saira took the stage. She stood on the seam Iris had indicated and let the room see her choose it. "Good evening," she said, voice the right mix of crisp and warm. "Thank you for coming. Tonight is simple. We're here to practice steadiness together, to name what helps and, carefully, what doesn't." She spoke for 10 minutes about breaths that lengthen thoughts,
about routines that hold us up when we're not sure what we're holding. Then she invited people to share, not stories. She was careful with that word, but observations, which let people set their feelings down without having to wrap them in a plot. A teacher mentioned the way the hallway clock in the school ticked too loud. A retiree said he felt best in the grocery aisle where the cans made perfect rows. A jogger gestured vaguely toward the river and said, "Sometimes there's a feeling there, nothing bad, just not mine." Iris sat at the end of the welcome table, pen in hand, mapping the room with her eyes. Each time someone said river, she felt her pulse answer like a metronome adjusting. Gideon stood, not on the stage, but near the maps. He said to the room, ordinary voice, nothing legal in it, "I'm curious, when you marked unease, was it for something you've seen or something you know without seeing?" Knowing without seeing is still knowing. She made a door where they hadn't expected one. A teenager in the back, the red hoodie, lifted a hand halfway, then let it hover. "My friend says his cat never goes past the alder bench, like there's a line there." "A seam," Iris said before she could stop herself. Heads turned to her, only for a heartbeat, but long enough for the word to hang in the air like a thread drawn across a dark cloth. Saira caught it and tied a bow on it. "We all have seams," she said, "places where things meet and don't quite mix. Sometimes honoring the seam is a way of being kind to both sides."
The room nodded, grateful for a way to agree. The questions moved like a careful tide. No one said the word missing aloud. No one had to. It moved under their shoes anyway, quiet and sure. When the evening wound down, Saira thanked everyone for their steadiness. People returned pins, returned pens, returned themselves to whatever stories, quiet or otherwise, waited at home. At the exit, as they passed the lost and found bin, they glanced down. Some faces changed, most didn't. The mother and the little girl left with the clover tag cupped in the mother's palm, as if hands could learn to be both graves and gardens. Gideon waited until the room had thinned. Then he stepped to the welcome table and looked at the sign-in sheet, not reading names so much as reading the spaces between them. "You were very good," he said quietly to Iris, "at making people feel safe while they told you exactly what you needed to know." "I didn't need to know anything," Iris said. "I'm here to arrange chairs." "Of course," he said, as if she'd confessed to liking chamomile. He tapped the pets column with a forefinger. "Still, patterns are a kind of furniture too." Saira joined them, gathering the pins into their jar. This was useful. People left lighter than they came. That's all we can ask. "Yes," Gideon said. His winter gaze touched the closet door, the tape neat and steady across the latch. "Sometimes light shows you where not to step." They packed in a practiced silence. Iris wiped the table, aligned the clipboard stack, set the pens parallel, then perpendicular, then parallel again. She folded the butcher paper maps with care, ease in one pile, unease in the other. She felt for the coil of red twine in her pocket and found it. Hot-cold relief slid down her arms. At the doorway, the boy in the red hoodie lingered. "Hey," he said to Iris, shy through bravado. "That seam thing, at the river? I think I know where you mean." "Lots of people know. They just call it different things." He nodded, like that made him a member of a club he hadn't known he wanted to join. "There's like a spot. If you throw a stick, it won't float right. My dog won't fetch there." He shrugged. "It's probably nothing." "Probably," Iris said, and let a small, harmless smile go up like a porch light. When the boy left, Gideon watched the door swing closed, watched the room take its breath again. "We'll need to lock up. Saira, I'll do the back. Iris, would you mind the front?"
They split. Iris checked the front, then checked it again. She re-smoothed the tape on the closet a final time. She turned, found Gideon beside her, found his gaze not hard, not soft, simply present. "You like doors that behave," he said. "I like rules that advertise themselves," she said. "Some rules only whisper. You have to stand very close to hear them." "I don't mind standing close," and she held his eyes a beat too long. On the walk home, the night had the taste of rain that changed its mind. The elms stroked the sky, the river ticked, the town listened without admitting it. Iris counted 7 lampposts and said the numbers in her head and felt the hum obey. Behind her, in the quiet grange, the tape held, but a single strand of red twine, its twin gone from the hook, hung on the pegboard like a bookmark saving a page. Graybridge pretended nothing had happened, which is what towns do best after evenings that make them think. The bakery put the same sugar on the same pastries. The apothecary set out a bowl of peppermint drops. The river kept its private metronome. At dawn, Gideon Pike stood at the alder bench and looked as if he were simply being sentimental about mist. He was not sentimental. He was counting distances in his head, branch to waterline, bench to path, the narrow wedge where the current snagged and hesitated. He leaned down, lifted a small stone, and set it back shifted 2 finger widths off true. Then, from his pocket, he tied a short loop of red twine, hardware store ordinary, around a low twig and tucked the knot to the far side where a passerby wouldn't notice unless their eyes searched for corners. He straightened, listened to the river, and left without looking back. By mid-morning, Iris shelved books with a mind as smooth as a wiped counter. The Grange's welcome table lived in her bones now. Her hands kept arranging things that weren't there. Mrs. Blodgett, hopping between tasks, pressed a muffin into Iris's hands as if her kindness were a salt lick.
"Debrief went well?" she asked. "Efficient," Iris said. "People like rules that let them talk without having to tell a story." Mrs. Blodgett nodded, as if Iris had said oatmeal was dependable. "We should do more like it. Lord knows folks sleep better when they've named their shadows." A woman posted a new notice on the community board. Not a pet this time. A man in his 70s, a familiar face from the hardware aisle, hadn't been seen since Thursday. The word "missing" looked different in that font. It was the same arrangement of letters. It was not the same weight. Iris trimmed a curly edge off a donated paperback, leveled the corners, slid the book into place. The hum rose, settled, rose again. Her phone buzzed. "Saira, walk tonight? Community steadiness stroll. Gideon says good weather for names. 6 p.m. at the Bend. Can you lead welcome again?" Iris typed, "Yes." She walked to the river early on purpose. Daylight felt more honest here. It showed how tangled the bank really was, how roots bit into dirt like careful hands. She paused at the bench and let her gaze do what it always did. Inventory. Branches, stones, the small, wrong angle of the one nearest her knee. Her eyes found the red loop on the twig the way a tongue finds a cut tooth. A simple knot, ordinary twine, nothing by itself, taken with the polish on the Grange's closet latch and the absence of one loop from a pegboard hook. It was a seam. She did not touch it. She put her hands on the bench and pressed down once, like someone steadying a table that didn't need it. Footsteps. Saira, light on the path, scarf thrown over one shoulder in a color that refused to be named. She said, "You always arrive as if the place had been waiting for you." Iris said, "Places don't wait. They're just there."
She said, "That can be a kind of waiting." Saira looked at the looped twine and did a convincing impression of not seeing it. She said, "We'll keep it gentle, a stroll. People mark ease and unease with their feet tonight instead of pens. I brought a clipboard." She had, and 3 pens, and a silent tally for how many faces would arrange themselves to look comfortable when they weren't. Gideon joined them with a small paper sack and the expression of a man bringing neutral provisions to a neutral enterprise. The boy in the red hoodie skidded in late, breathless on purpose. Mr. Gilroy came with his old dog, who tugged against a leash once, then sat down hard in the dirt and told the world no with its bones. "Welcome," Iris said when they'd collected a manageable number of neighbors. "We're going to walk a short loop. You don't have to talk. If your feet want to stop, stop. If there's a place your body says yes or no, you can tell us or not. No wrong answers." She watched faces walk through the words, watched shoulders loosen. Order could be a blanket if you spread it with both hands. They moved as a slow arrangement of separate minds. The path to the bend narrowed to a polite single file. Saira drifted beside each person for a few steps, asking soft questions without adding pressure. Gideon stayed near the back, stopping when the dog would not go forward and kneeling to let it sniff his palm.
At the older bench, the group thinned out. Some people sat because other people were sitting. The boy in the red hoodie scuffed a toe at the water and said to no one, "It's weirder right here." "Weird how?" Saira asked, turning toward him as if she'd been summoned. "Not like ghosts." He flushed, embarrassed. Like the river's got rules, and they're stricter right here. Sticks don't float right. I don't know." "Rules can cluster," Saira said. "They like company." Iris kept her gaze near her hands. If she looked up, she'd look at the red loop. If she looked at the loop, she'd tip her face too far toward something she didn't want seen. Mr. Gilroy tugged the leash. The dog leaned backward, toenails whispering in the dirt. Mr. Gilroy huffed and looked sorry for the huff. "He used to fetch down here," he said to Gideon. "Old fool. Now he won't take one step." "Old isn't foolish," Gideon said mildly. "Sometimes it's just unamused." He rose, let his eyes pass over the twine without landing, and asked the group, would anyone like to walk the next 30 paces with their eyes closed? He smiled, taking the sting out of it. "I'll count. Saira will spot you. It can help you listen to your feet." A few tried. A few laughed and declined. Iris did not close her eyes, but she counted with him, quietly, to 7, then to 13, then to 19, familiar intervals that fit her bones. They moved on. At a shallow bend where stones grew flatter and more certain, a girl of 9 crouched and made a game of arranging pebbles into a little city. Parallel lines, tiny squares, a road. "Like that?" she asked, visiting each adult with her face, asking them to be delighted in the correct proportion. "Perfect," Saira said, and meant it. "Careful with the edges," Iris said, before she could tame the words. She crouched and straightened 2 pebbles by a hair's width, making the road true. The girl nodded, relieved to have the invisible rule explained out loud. They moved on. At a shallow bend where stones grew flatter and more certain, a girl of 9 crouched and made a game of arranging pebbles into a little city. Parallel lines, tiny squares, a road. "Like that?" she asked, visiting each adult with her face, asking them to be delighted in the correct proportion. "Perfect," Saira said, and meant it. "Careful with the edges," Iris said, before she could tame the words. She crouched and straightened 2 pebbles by a hair's width, making the road true.
The girl nodded, relieved to have the invisible rule explained out loud. They looped through a patch of birch where the bark peeled in polite curls, then back toward the bench. The red loop of twine remained what it had been. A loop, a knot, nothing. But it might as well have been a siren. At the end, Iris thanked people for walking. She wrote the number of attendees in her neat, narrow script and noted the places where shoulders had relaxed at once, where feet had hesitated in a way that passed through the group like a small shiver. Gideon passed the paper sack around. It held wrapped shortbread and nothing with peanuts. Civic sugar, no one fights civic sugar. "Thank you," the mother with the unused leash said. The little girl who had arranged the Pebble City reached into the bag and chose the smallest cookie, like leaving treasures for others might buy the world a bit of good behavior. When the crowd thinned, Saira stood with Iris under the alder fringe. "I've been thinking about a follow-up, something quieter. We're collecting routines, things that make people feel steady at home. I want to make a little booklet. Would you help me draft the template? You think in columns better than anyone I know."
"What would it ask?" Iris said. "Nothing sharp," Saira promised. "Wake time, lock checks, cooking habits, where people keep extra keys. It's not a survey, it's a mirror. People behave better with mirrors." Iris could do mirrors. She could do columns. "Yes," she said. "Send me the draft." Saira nodded as if they'd traded recipes. Then softer, "Would you let me see your routine for the booklet? Only if you want. It helps to start with a real house, not a pretend one. I like showing things when they're tidy. Tomorrow, late afternoon?" "Tomorrow," Saira said, and wrote the time without looking, as if her hand knew the numbers on its own. Gideon stood a few steps away, listening to the river. "I'll stop by after." He said it to the air between them, and the air decided it was a reasonable plan. They parted like people who believed in sidewalks. Iris took the long way home again. The loop felt safer than the straight line. The hum in her chest was not a siren, it was a needle finding the groove of a record and refusing to skip. At home, she set her keys in their dish, smoothed her notepad, laid 3 pens parallel, then, because she had decided last week that letting things be off was good exercise, left 1 pen skewed. She stood in the doorway and watched it for a long time, then turned it until it aligned with the others and felt the world release a breath. She laughed very quietly at herself for needing the breath. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unsaved number. "You missed a spot." She read it twice with the blankness she used for hard math. Then she looked at the 3 pens on her table and tried to decide which spot the message meant. Another text, "See you at 4." She deleted both. It was a relief to erase letters that wanted too much. Across town, under yellow kitchen light, Gideon set a short length of identical red twine on his legal pad and wrote, "Saira, home visit. Watch for rooms that advertise themselves." He drew a small square for each door in a tidy list of rooms and penciled a dot where he expected a lock to live. He added a note under the last square, "Seam not equal to line. Seam equal meeting." He turned off the lamp and stood in the dark, in the mild way a person stands in a doorway deciding not to leave. He thought about the loop at the river and the polish on the closet latch, and the way Iris had corrected the pebble road as if the earth had asked for it. He was not frightened. He was not certain. He was a man listening to a tick inside a wall and choosing better tools. In the quiet, the town rehearsed its ordinary. The elm stroked the air. The river counted to itself. Somewhere, a dog lay down where it would not be asked to cross and shut its eyes as if that were the same thing as being safe. By late afternoon,
the light in Iris's apartment behaved itself. It came in at a slant, laid down a thin, obedient sheen on the table, and didn't try to be dramatic. She set out 2 glasses, a small plate, and the draft Saira had emailed, a skeleton of columns for the steadiness booklet. On the inside of the front door, she pressed each lock once, then again, then a 3rd time, because practice could be its own kind of calm. She told herself 7 was for show. She stopped at 3. At 4 exactly, the bell chimed once. Saira stood in the hall with the familiar tote and that particular careful brightness certain professionals wear. Friendly, but not greedy. "Come in," Iris said. "It's a small place." "Small can be truthful," Saira said, and slipped off her shoes as if she'd always known to do it.
Iris showed her the rooms the way people show photographs, in an order that admits an order. Living room, kitchen with its neat geometry, jars, labels, the quiet grammar of stacked plates. A bedroom the color of sleep. The short corridor with 2 doors, linen closet, utility alcove, both closed. The windows had simple blinds that agreed to be where they were. Saira didn't ask to open anything. She let the rooms say what they wanted. "For the booklet," she said, stopping by the kitchen table, "I'd like to include 3 short templates: morning, evening, and storm day. You know, when the weather inside or out is louder than usual. Storm can be anything." "Morning," Iris said, thinking aloud. "Wake time. Heat on or off. Coffee or tea. Windows checked. Door locked." "Once?" Saira asked, writing the word in a way that didn't trap it. "Enough," Iris said, and looked out the window until the number in her head forgot to insist on a shape. "Do you count?" Saira asked. "Neutral as weather. I like knowing if there are numbers living in a routine. Some rhythms want a metronome." "Yes," Iris said. "7s." Then, because offering this piece felt oddly like placing a chair where a guest could see the view, she added, "3s if I need to look like a person who doesn't count." Saira's pen paused, then moved on without circling back to the admission. "Evening?" "Tea," Iris said. "Dishes, locks. A walk sometimes, lists." "Would you show me your list?" Saira asked, not peering, asking. "It helps to have a real one to put in the booklet as a sample. I can change the details, of course." Iris lifted the blue grid notebook from the table. The page on top was tidy. A column of tasks for the Grange, a column of groceries, a thin seam of numbers between, distances, times, cross streets, that looked like nothing if you weren't in the habit of reading seams. She turned the page once so it showed less than it could, and let Saira glance. "This is perfect," Saira said, and meant the precision, not the privacy. "May I take a photograph to use as a model? I'll crop it. No names." Iris said, "You can copy the layout, no pictures." She said it gently. It settled. They sat. Saira unfolded the draft. "For the storm day, I want prompts that help people name what steadies them. Where they sit, which room feels most on their side, whether they need sound or quiet, whether they tend to walk to the same place without thinking." "The river," Iris said, then in the tone of someone who thinks a thought and writes it down without ceremony. "Not the bend, a little upstream." Saira's eyes acknowledged the sentence and filed it. "We can add a line, outdoors that feel like a yes." Iris checked her phone for the time. A new message slid in from an unsaved number. "Nice host." She tilted the screen slightly, let the glow fade, and set the phone face down. "We can add lights you leave on," she said. "People underestimate light." "Good," Saira said. "And if it's all right, I'd like to write that you check the locks 3 times when the room is noisy." "I don't," Iris said evenly, "but you can write that someone does." Saira's smile was a small, private thing. Someone. The bell chimed once more at 4:30. Gideon's silhouette on the frosted glass looked like a neat pencil line. "I brought a few examples for the booklet," he said when Iris opened the door, holding up a file folder as if it could pass as a bouquet. "Old neighborhood watch templates. Also, apologies, my bicycle cord frayed. Do you have a length of twine? I'd rather not lose a wheel to an optimistic thief." "In the drawer," Iris said, and crossed to the kitchen. The top drawer, organized, nothing sharp out of place, held a small coil of ordinary red twine tucked beside rubber bands. She took the coil out, measured off a decent length with her eye, and cut it. The small snick of scissors felt like a punctuation mark inside a sentence she hadn't decided to write. "Thank you," Gideon said. He looped the twine calmly, tied a simple knot with the ease of someone who respects string for being exactly what it is, and pocketed the length. A fleck of red fiber clung to the table's edge. He did not flick it away. Saira and Gideon spread the old templates beside the new. "Emergency contacts," he read, tapping a column. "Spare keys, if any. Where it lives, doormat, planter, neighbor. We'll add, prefer not to say." He glanced at Iris, acknowledging the door that she had insisted exist. "We'll need to translate some of these for the way people talk now," Saira said. "No one says call tree anymore. We can write group text." A quiet fell that wasn't empty. It had the shape of a room listening. Iris stood to put on the kettle. In the corridor, when she reached for the cupboard door to fetch extra cups, her hand paused. A line of tape ran inside the frame at shoulder height, an old painter's mark left by the previous tenant. It didn't matter. It was a line. She smoothed her palm over it once. The cupboard door opened without complaint.
Behind her, Saira glanced down the short hall, not to pry, but to notice. She saw the tape because it wanted to be seen, and made a note on the draft. Lines that ask to be respected. She wrote it as if it were a general principle, and maybe it was. They drank tea that didn't taste like anything dangerous. Gideon asked for a spoon and set it perfectly parallel to the edge of the saucer, then turned it a hair's width to see if Iris would realign it. She didn't. Not immediately. She let the hair's width be. He nodded once to himself, as if a small suspicion had just been shown the door politely. Saira described the next community step. "I'm thinking a sparrows and porch lights night," she said. "A simple ritual. People bring a photograph of a pet or a place they miss feeling easy. We'll light a candle. We'll name routines that will help the town through the restlessness." "A memorial," Gideon said, precise without being somber. "Not for grief exactly, for steadiness." "Do you want help with the flyers?" Iris asked. The question came out calm. The air between it and the answer felt thinner than paper. "Yes," Saira said. "Thank you." Gideon sipped, set the cup down, and looked toward the hallway with the unassuming curiosity of someone mapping the practical limits of a house. "May I wash my hands?" he asked. "Ink," he said, and showed a faint smudge that could have come from anywhere. "First door, linen closet on the left, utility to the right." He went and was gone only a moment. The sink ran exactly as long as hand washing takes when a person minds germs and not theater. He returned with his sleeves still neat and his gaze undecorated by anything he hadn't gone in with. "Good water pressure," he said. "The building super does his job." "Usually," Iris said. They finished the draft, they chose fonts, they agreed on lines that felt like kindness and lines that felt like nosiness and how to tell the difference. At the door, Saira touched Iris's arm with the kind of pressure that says, "We are both people,"
and neither of us is a project. Tomorrow, if you like, you can meet me at the apothecary, she said. We'll print and cut. Gideon makes a decent stapler. She smiled, and the smile reached the parts of her face that could have chosen not to cooperate. Tomorrow, Iris said. She locked the door behind them once, then again, because they were listening, and steadiness is contagious in both directions. The apartment held the warmth of their presence a minute after they'd gone, then let it go. Iris washed the 2 glasses, left them to air dry for the booklet's sake, straightened the file folder so its edge agreed with the table. She looked at the fleck of red fiber Gideon had left, a hair-thin line of color against the wood, and made herself walk away from it. She didn't put it in the bin. She didn't save it. She let it be a thing the room could forget. Her phone, face down, hummed on the table. Another unsaved message slid into being. Good practice. She likes your seams. She deleted it. She put the phone in the drawer with the coil of twine and the rubber bands. She closed the drawer gently and put her hand flat on the wood until her breathing matched the table's patience. Across town, Saira and Gideon stood in the mild shadow of the elm outside the building. Cars went by without needing them. The river kept its own counsel. Well, Gideon asked softly. She likes lines that tell the truth about being lines, and she counts. She shortens it when someone is watching, and she lets a crooked spoon be if she decides that's the rule. And the doors, he asked. She respects their statements. If a door says closed, she doesn't force it. If a line says I'm a seam, she steps on it to see if it holds. He nodded, satisfied with the language, if not yet with what it might uncover. The Sparrows and Porchlights night will tell us more. Bring photographs, bring colors, bring routines. It will be good. And the word good held something like resolve. We keep it gentle, Saira said. Gentle can be a very sharp tool. They parted. The street reassembled itself into ordinary. Inside, Iris stood very still and listened to the building breathe. Somewhere above, a neighbor set a mug on a table. Somewhere below, a faucet admitted to being old. In the quiet, she could almost hear the seam between her rooms and everyone else's, a thin line that held for now. She turned out the lights with the careful rhythm of someone denying a superstition and granting it anyway. In the dark, she counted to 7 and then to 3, let both numbers settle, and did not open the closet door. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what was on its peg, an empty hook, a small question, and a line of old paint that decided to keep being a line.
The apothecary's printer made a small, steady sound like a polite metronome. Flyers slid out one after another, the ink still shining before it committed to paper. On the counter, Gideon had laid a cutting mat, a metal ruler, and a stapler that closed with a dignified click. The peppermint drops watched from their glass jar as if this too were medicine. Iris Calder, Saira had typed across the top of the first draft, template lead. Beneath that, in clean lines, Sparrows and Porchlights, a night for steadiness. Bring a photo, pet, place, a small object that means easy, collar tag, porch key, pebble, and one routine you want to keep. LED candles provided. We'll set a tone with the font, Saira said. Nothing that shouts, something that knows how to be present. Gideon nodded toward a calm sans serif. This looks as if it has already done its job. Iris lifted the first sheet and checked the margins. One corner leaned a fraction toward mischief. The title sat a breath off-center. It was the kind of thing no one saw unless they were already in the habit of seeing. Again, she said softly, and fed the draft back through to print true. She trimmed the edge flush and stacked the good copy on top. The sound of paper aligning calmed the air. Gideon set out elastic bands and, innocently like sugar packets, a small coil of red twine. We'll bundle in 10s for the notice boards, he said. Elastics for speed, twine for the boards that still want to feel old-fashioned.
Iris's gaze touched the coil and went away. "Twine tangles," she said. "Elastics behave." "Then elastics," Gideon said, and let the coil stay where it was, a red comma on the counter. They worked the way practiced hands work, quietly, each task finding its next shape. Saira fed the printer and stacked the sheets in a rhythm that never made the machine feel rushed. Iris cut, squared, counted to 10, and slipped a band around each bundle so it hugged without pinching. Gideon stamped the date in the lower corner, September 12, small, not shouting, a way to tell the future when the past had happened. When a small shuffle sounded at the door, Gideon said, "We're open," and the bell chimed to agree. Mr. Gilroy's old dog paused on the threshold and looked offended at the concept of entering. Mr. Gilroy himself peered at the flyers with the resigned curiosity of a man who had learned to listen to paper. "What's this, then?" he asked. "Ritual," Saira said. "A friendly one. Photographs, porch lights, good habits. You should come. No speech is required." "Can I bring my dog?" he asked. "Of course," Gideon said. "He can take the role of skeptic." The dog snorted, relieved to have his temperament honored. Mr. Gilroy nodded and drifted out again, the leash a line between them that said more than most sentences. The boy in the red hoodie came in next. He had a quarter-baked swagger and the kind of eyes that want to be useful. He said deliberately casual, "Do you need help?" "Yes," Iris said, because it was easier to give a job than to navigate a refusal. "Bundles of 10. Neat." He grinned and took the task seriously. He counted under his breath, a whisper of numbers that sounded like someone learning a language they almost already knew. Gideon handed him a single flyer to keep. He said, "There's a map on the back. Drop boxes for people who can't come. Library, bakery, church vestibule, the jar at the river bench, too." "A jar," Iris said. "A sealed one," Gideon said, without looking at her. "Dry, clear, labeled. For notes like, 'My porch feels wrong at noon,' or 'My cat never went past the older.' People want somewhere to put their knowing, even when they're not ready to say it out loud." Saira slid a small LED candle across the counter, the kind that pretends a flicker without needing flame. "We use these," she said. "No actual fire, PG in every sense." Iris pressed the candle switch. A soft gold hummingbird of light appeared inside. "They obey," she said. "I like that." The printer sighed to a stop. The counter had become a field of tidy stacks. Saira counted them, then counted again. "Enough for the boards and the porches," she said, "and a few extra for hands that only decide at the last minute." Gideon set a small wooden tray on the counter. Inside lay a handful of oddities the apothecary collected until their owners came back for them. A rubber cap from a walking stick, a brass key without a tooth, a photo booth strip of a couple making faces pieced into 4 squares, a green thread-worn ribbon. He added the clover tag for a moment, not because it belonged there, its owner had claimed it, but because he wanted to see which object Iris's gaze would land on when presented with a small weather of lost things.
Her eyes moved over the tray without catching, then paused, not on the tag, not on the ribbon, but on the blank brass key. "We should add a line to the flyer," she said. "No need to write your address, only whether you keep a spare key at home or with a friend. People will lie if the question shows its teeth." "Good," Saira said, and wrote it in with a gentle hand. She watched Iris watch the key and felt the tiniest adjustment in the silent map she kept in her head. The bell chimed again. A woman in a raincoat that had misread the sky stepped in holding a hat by the brim. "This was down by the birch path," she said. Does it belong to the man in the notice?" Gideon took the hat as if it had asked to be held. Brown felt, clean, the crease where a head had lived. "I'll contact the family," he said. "Thank you. We'll put a small..."
Note, Saira added, choosing the least sharp word, at the board. Found near the birch path. People behave better with accurate nouns. The woman nodded, grateful to have done a correct thing. She took a flyer, promised to come, and left the door ringing its small agreement behind her. The boy in the red hoodie tapped a finger on the map on the flyer's back. "You put the river jar right by the bench," he said. "Smart." "People like the sense that the place is listening back," Gideon said. The boy nodded, folded the flyer into fourths with care, and tucked it in his pocket, as if paper might behave better when kept near a pulse. They went back to their quiet industry. Saira labeled the Dropbox envelopes and wrote his small script at the bottom of each for volunteers. Greet gently. Offer 1 LED. 1 pin for ease, 1 pin for unease. No rush, no rescue. She underlined the last 2 words. Gideon stamped dates. Iris built a stack so precise the edges acted like a single thing. At noon, Saira recorded a short audio for the town website on her phone. "Tomorrow night, we set out sparrows and porch lights. Bring what steadies you. Leave what you can't say yet in the jar. No speeches. We will listen." "Would you read a sample routine?" Saira asked Iris when she finished, casual as offering a second cup of tea. "For the booklet page, just to show people how simple it can be." Iris considered the counter, the ruler, the line of stamped dates. Morning. Wake. Window. Kettle. Locks. Once. Walk if the air isn't arguing. Make a list that matches the day. Check the list. Saira stopped the recording there, not because she needed more, but because she already had enough. She said, "Perfect." And it was, in the way chairs arranged themselves when the room deserved that kind of attention. Gideon adjusted the peppermint jar so it sat a hair out of line with the cutting mat. He pretended to read the notice board while his winter gaze watched the counter's geometry in the window's reflection. In 2 breaths, Iris moved the jar the slightest fraction back into agreement with the edge. Not fussy, not dramatic, just set to rights. He did not smile. He wrote a note in his head. Default to alignment. When the flyers were packed, library, bakery, church vestibule, grange, the jar at the bench, they parceled out tasks. The boy in the red hoodie took a half-armful for the school commons with the solemn crew of someone getting to do a grown thing. Mr. Gilroy made a point of not volunteering and then carried a bundle toward the barber's window anyway. Iris took the library stack. Gideon put the hat in a paper bag that said, "Thank you," as if the bag had feelings. Before she left, Iris peeled 1 flyer from the stack and met Saira's eye. "Do we really need the line about collars and tags? Some people will not like to be asked." "Some won't," Saira said. "Some will be relieved that we know what to call small grief." Iris nodded as if they were discussing weather. She slipped the flyer into her tote between the blue grid notebook and a pencil with a perfectly honest tip. Outside, daylight went about its business. The river squared its shoulders and went on saying what it had always said. At the alder bench, a wide-mouthed jar had appeared on the small table Gideon kept tucked beneath the seat for picnic chess. The label, written in his hand, read, "Your quiet knowing." It wasn't a trap. It was a mirror. Mirrors can be sharp. Iris walked there last. She set the library bundle on the bench, took the rubber band off one pack, and slid a few flyers under the jar so the words would not blow away if the wind forgot its manners. She did not look for the loop of red twine on the low twig. She saw it anyway, the way the body notices a seam in a shirt without needing the eyes to help. Her phone buzzed. A text from the unsaved number. Nice map. The jar is kind. She deleted it. She had no intention of texting a stranger back to tell them that kindness can also be a scale.
On the way home, the bakery window reflected the sky as if the town had decided to practice being vast. Mrs. Blodgett waved from the library desk when Iris dropped the flyers, and later Iris saw them on the corkboard, 10 neat rectangles marching down a line like a lesson in how to be calm. Evening arrived with the kind of gray that tries to be a color. Iris set one LED candle on her table and watched it pretend to breathe. She arranged a small photograph she kept in a drawer, porch steps from her childhood house, nothing more, and considered whether to bring it tomorrow. It was harmless. It was a place where the shape of leaving had made sense. Her phone hummed again. Another unsaved message. Tomorrow, bring something you won't miss. She placed the phone face down, the way you put a lid on a pot to stop it arguing with the room. She opened the blue grid notebook and wrote in her neat, narrow hand, tables, pens, candles, map, jar keys. Then lower, smaller, allowance for crooked spoon? Yes. It was a joke she allowed herself to have. Across town, Gideon set the rescued hat on his kitchen table and dialed a number from the notice. He spoke softly and made an appointment to hand it over, and he wrote the time on his legal pad with a line that thought twice before it turned the corner. Then he added a line beneath it. Sparrows and porch lights, front row, watch for eyes at routine, key, porch. Saira at her own table listened back to Iris's recorded routine. She listened to the pauses, not suspiciously, but the way a musician listens to rests. She wrote herself a reminder in the margin of the booklet. Add a line for a place you avoid without knowing why. She underlined it once, a soft underline. Night brought the usual grammar of lamps behind curtains. The elms stroked the air. Somewhere a neighbor set down a mug and the building agreed. On Iris's doormat when she opened the door to check the lock a final time, lay an empty envelope with nothing inside but a single clipping of red twine the length of her little finger. She looked at it as if it were an ordinary scrap of thread that had fallen out of the day's hem. She did not pick it up. She returned to the table, opened the drawer, and placed her phone next to the coil of twine, rubber bands, and a single LED candle she would bring tomorrow. She shut the drawer gently, as if closing a small mouth that had had its say. Then she turned off the lights with the same careful rhythm as always, counted to 7 in the dark, then to 3, and let both numbers go. The river kept counting without her. The jar breathed quietly by the bench, and the town, as towns do, pretended to be asleep while it listened very hard. By early evening, the Grange Hall held a soft, deliberate glow. Iris arrived first to teach the room its manners. Chairs and gentle arcs, welcome table aligned with the door so people didn't have to think to be kind. A long table near the stage laid with LED candles like a shallow constellation. On a second table, a small sign in Saira's calm handwriting read, "Your objects of easy." Beneath it, a wooden tray waited for photographs, collar tags, door keys that didn't unlock anything anymore. She pressed the closet tape flat with the side of her hand, intact. Then, because she could feel a plan forming under the room like a second floor, she traced the tape's edge with her thumb and found it dusted, faintly, with something like pencil. Gideon's tidy version of a footprint trap. Not accusatory, confirmational.
She left it alone and moved on. Saira came in with the tote and a box of booklets printed fresh, corners tight. Gideon followed with a small metal tin and the glass jar from the river, now lidded. It held a careful handful of folded slips. "Good news," Saira said softly, setting down the booklets. "The printer liked us today." "Miracles," Gideon said, and set the tin on the objects of easy table. When he opened it, red twine sat in small pre-cut lengths, each coiled and tamed. A label inside the lid read, "Tie your routine to your place." He looked up at Iris as if to apologize for the metaphor, and didn't. "We'll keep it gentle," Saira murmured, half to the room, half to Iris. "No sharp questions, no fishing." "Gentle is a tool. You've said that." The hall filled with the kind of hush people bring to rituals they haven't invented yet. Mr. Gilroy took a seat near the exit, his old dog settling on the cool wood with a huff that sounded like no, but didn't insist. The boy in the red hoodie orbited the maps and tried not to look like he wanted a job. The mother with the little girl, the one who carried a leash without a dog, came in holding a photocopy of a collar tag on thin paper. The girl cupped it, like you carry a small flame cupped against the wind. At the welcome table, Iris offered pens and a smile you could stand under. Name, contact, and, if you like, one routine you'd keep even on a storm day. People paused, pleased to have an answer they already knew, and wrote, "Walk at dusk, tea after washing plates, call my sister, check locks, once." Iris's pen recorded the answers on a second sheet in small, neat script, as if she were braiding a rope out of habits.
When the chairs were full, Saira stood on the seam. "Tonight is simple," she said, lighting one LED to show the others how to glow. "Place something on the easy table if you've brought it. Turn on a candle. If you want, say one sentence about a routine that steadies you. Then, on the maps, tie a length of twine from your routine to the place it lives. If the place is in your kitchen, tie to the word kitchen on this paper house. If it's the river path, tie to the river. No wrong answers, no rush."
A murmur of relief went through the room. People like being told there are no wrong answers by someone who means it. They lined up. The little girl went first because children understand doors with signs that say yes. She set the photocopied clover tag on the tray as if it were a seashell and not paper. "We light our porch light before dinner," she said, "so we can see who's coming." Her mother squeezed her shoulder. The LED candle hummed a low light in front of them. Mr. Gilroy placed a dog biscuit on the tray and said, "We do our slow lap. He says where, not me." The room smiled. The dog declined to notice. The boy in the red hoodie lay a flat stone on the tray that had once lived in a pocket long enough to forget being a river. "I check the bridge railing when I run," he said, looking at no one, "so it knows I'm there." A teacher laid a photo of a tidy bulletin board. An elderly woman set a small tarnished key beside a photograph of a porch. A teenager placed a pencil, chewed at one end, and said, "I sharpen it before homework because it lets me start." Iris stood behind the welcome table and watched hands, how they approached the twine, how they measured, without measuring, the distance from tray to map. She watched knots, clumsy, careful, 2 loops, 1. Her chest hummed when a knot turned crisp and symmetrical. She didn't move. She let the hum be a radio left on in another room. When most had tied their routines to their places, Saira nodded toward the jar. "A few notes came to the bench," she said, voice still a blanket. "We'll read 3, only 3. We're not collecting secrets, we're making room." Gideon unscrewed the lid with the attention you give jam that matters. He chose a slip without looking like he was choosing. He unfolded it, winter eyes passing down the lines, then read, simple as weather.
He said, "At the alder bench, I hear someone counting when there isn't anyone there. It makes my feet speed up, and I hate that." A small shift passed through the room. Recognition, not accusation. Saira said, "Thank you," as if the paper had a face. "Counting isn't a failure, it's a bridge." He read the second. "I used to go past the bend. Now my dog won't. I don't fight her. We take the long way, and I pretend I like it better." Another small shift. The dog thumped his tail exactly once and refused to explain himself. The third note was short. Red loops, small ones, like someone is marking stitches on the town. A murmur like leaves, eyes flicked. Iris's gaze did not move at all. Saira lifted a booklet. "These are for home, routines with room in them. You can fill them out or not. The point is not to turn life into a checklist. The point is to notice that you already have one." Gideon gestured toward the twine. "If tying your routine to a place felt useful, leave your string. It'll help us see where steadiness collects." People nodded. Some looked relieved to abandon their twine exactly where they'd tied it, as if the tidy red lines could continue doing the job in their absence. As the hours stretched and softened, the room did what rooms do when they have been taught tenderness. Voices dropped to the gentle register that lets quiet be part of the conversation. The exit sign glowed. The clock kept time without saying so out loud. The fan cage did not rattle. Gideon had wedged a felt pad under one bracket, and it obeyed. A soft thud came from the stage, nothing dramatic, a board resettling under the weight of air. Mr. Gilroy's dog raised its head and put it down again. The mother touched the photocopied tag like a superstition she didn't want to admit to needing. The boy in the red hoodie stood at the map and traced, without touching, the diagonal where the red lines had begun to cluster. River, porch, bridge, kitchen window that faced east. The pattern looked like a stitch someone had started and intended to finish. Iris moved through it all the way a seam runs beneath fabric, present, understated, holding. She passed the LED candles and righted two that leaned. She adjusted a leaflet's corner so the stack remembered itself. When a length of twine looped too high, she tied it off lower, neat. Saira drifted to her side. "What word do you use for the place you avoid without knowing why?" Iris watched a red line pull from a photo of a kettle to the small square on the paper house labeled kitchen. Iris said, "Seam." "Not edge," Saira murmured. "Edges are endings," Iris said. "Seams are where things agree to touch." Saira's eyes warmed a fraction. "Thank you for that."
Gideon was not on the stage. He filed papers. He adjusted the peppermint jar he had brought out because people behave better when something old-fashioned is in the room. He flipped the metal tin's lid so the label, "Tie your routine to your place," was visible, and refused to check the graphite on the closet latch until the room had earned the right to rest. Near the end, a small rain began, the kind you hear on the roof before you admit it's weather. People took that as a cue to gather their photographs, blow out nothing, and thank no one in particular. The LED candles kept pretending to breathe without needing actual air. Saira closed with a sentence that felt like closing a book without snapping it shut. "Tonight's work is simple," she said. "Steadiness is not bravery, it's practice. Keep what helps, set down what doesn't. Let the porch light be on, even if you're not waiting for anyone." Chairs murmured against the floor. The room did not rush itself. The little girl tucked the photocopied tag into her pocket as if paper could be persuaded to remember. At the exit, Gideon thanked people without holding them in place. He let them see his face and then let them pass through it.
When the room had thinned to Saira, Iris, the boy in the red hoodie helping gather bands off the floor, and Mr. Gilroy's dog refusing to leave until the ritual had been dismissed properly, Gideon turned, finally, toward the closet. The tape was where Iris had left it. The faint powder of graphite was not. It rimmed the latch now in a smudged crescent, as if a thumb had tested the boundary during the evening and thought better of it at the last second. Gideon did not touch it. He moved a ledger to hide the latch from the boy's curious glance. "We'll lock up," he said, ordinary as a broom. "Saira, would you collect the jar?" She did, turning it in her hand like a snow globe that didn't trust itself with weather. Through the glass, Iris saw an extra slip that hadn't been there before. It was folded very small, almost careful enough to pass as dust. She kept her face a smooth surface and kept arranging the chairs. When the doors were closed and the rain had decided to be rain, Gideon set the jar on the welcome table and unscrewed the lid. "One more," he said, "because rituals like to finish on a number that sits well." He tipped the smallest slip into his palm, unfolded it, read. It contained only 3 words, written in narrow, neat handwriting that admitted nothing and everything. "You missed one." He did not show it. He slid the paper back into the jar and put the lid on and looked at Saira with a meaning that did not need language. "What did it say?" the boy in the red hoodie asked, trying to be casual and getting halfway there. "That we did well," Gideon said gently. "Thank you for the chairs." The boy nodded, pleased to have been part of whatever had just happened. Mr. Gilroy's dog finally stood, shook once, and led his person toward the door as if to say, "That's enough for tonight." They finished in silence. The red lines stayed on the maps, making a geometry of public steadiness. The LED candles were turned off one by one until the room held only the softened light of the exit sign and the sound of rain doing its work without supervision. Iris put the last chair in the last arc and counted to 7 without moving her lips. On the way out, she glanced once, not long, at the closet latch. Then she turned her head and looked at the seam between door and frame, the narrow shadow that told the truth about meeting, and felt the hum in her chest find the tone it had been looking for all evening. Outside, the elm stroked the wet air with the regardless patience of trees. The river, somewhere behind the rain, kept its count. In Iris's pocket, a tiny fleck of red fiber she had not meant to keep clung to her fingertip and refused to be shaken off.